Oh, I'm wonderful. You're right on time. I love that. How are you?
Thank you. I tried. I had to.
Oh, I appreciate it.
Oh no, yeah. I try to be prompt. I mean, you're taking time out of your schedule to do this, and I do appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I thank you for asking me. I think it'll be fun.
Yeah, I think it will be. I love this topic because like I tell my listeners, everybody should take some interest in this because we're all going to go there, and it's a good
Hmm.
idea to maybe know what's coming, at least a little bit.
Yeah, and I think having a belief for ourselves, too, really impacts our quality of life now.
Yeah.
And the truth is, more people die with regrets. I've talked to a heart surgeon who's done thousands of operations, and he says every single person he has that last conversation with before they get put under, and they all have regrets. They all have stuff they should have said or shouldn't have said. They start questioning their faith, even if they're atheists. They start praying to somebody, and what would it be like to handle that before the end? So I think
Oh,
it's
I
important.
know. When my mom was sick back in 2001, my mother got sick with cancer, and we knew we were
Oh,
going to lose her. And I made sure I thought about that. I guess this, my interest in this topic probably helped, but I made sure that I left no stone unturned before she
right.
passed away. I said what I wanted to say. We had some great conversations about things, and I have no regrets. I miss her,
Yeah.
obviously, but
Of course. Of
yeah.
course. Of course. Of course.
So tell me, okay, uh, what got you going? I mean, it's really a no-brainer of why you would take an interest in this. I mean, I think everyone should, but what got you researching this topic and putting the book out there?
The first thing was the kind of two parts to that question, because not in a million years would I have ever believed I'd be a published author, or that I'd tell the people or tell anybody the truth about me studying the life after death part. But to answer it is, back in 1996, I went through this incredible fear of dying. And I don't think it was prompted by one event. I think it was my grandfather had died, and certainly I'd lost pets. And there was, my life was just bad, crappy. Bad things were happening, heartaches galore, jobs not working out. And there are those moments, that when we look at the stars and you start questioning what is it all about. Well, for some reason it came across as just this huge fear of dying, and I couldn't handle not knowing what happens next. And just what I was taught about religion wasn't enough. It's like that somewhere out there, there's got to be something, because I literally couldn't sleep at night. It was awful, and bad dreams and everything. So that whole life after death journey began back in 1996 and lasted. Well, I mean, if you've read through my book, you'll see some of my cool investigations. But I was always someone, Michael, that didn't believe people. I didn't believe anybody who would be interested in life after death studies, or mediums, or psychics, or astrologers, or people that had near-death experiences. My excuse was, well, that's just what the brain does when it shuts down. There's no proof. So for me to be on this journey and then uncover this evidence, yes, it rested my fears, but there was no way I was going to tell people, because I was pretty vocal that I didn't believe in this stuff. So I kept it secret. And my dad passed away in 2010, was diagnosed with cancer, and I spent the last 5 months of his life with him, and it was really hard, because
Tough.
watching, the person you love so dearly that gave you life disappear. And I had once had a real close-knit relationships with my siblings, and then we started fighting. And of course, the fear of losing Dad, and then when he did die, was horrible. He died a very painful death. And then the grief that followed. I had lost my grandmother a few years before Dad died, and that was horribly sad and painful, because I was close to her. But the the grief that I felt after Dad died was something like I could have never imagined that so much pain could be felt from emotions, not from, like physical, somebody cutting me or burning me. And so I started this kind of this search into grief. What is it? Why does it hurt so bad? Why would a good, loving family like mine start to fight? And I uncovered some things about grief that beyond, we always hear about the 5 stages of grief, and we all know it's going to hurt, and we all know there's going to be anger. But I started finding out what happens within our brain chemistry that really causes change in perception. So the occurring world that we see, if you and I were brother and sister, kind of like if two people are looking at a car accident, you know how we always hear no two stories are the same?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's the same thing with grief, the grieving mind, even worse. So two people might be having the same conversation, and we're storing it differently in our brain. We don't have enough of certain brain chemicals while we're grieving. And like that was an aha moment for me, that I realized that, oh, no wonder our communication skills are off while we're grieving. Our memory is gone. Our perception is gone. That on top of all the anger and the sadness, no wonder there are these fights. And there's millions of families that come apart when a loved one dies. There's 80% divorce rate if a couple loses a child, and there's 90% divorce rate if somebody in a relationship is diagnosed with a life-threatening illness. And there's over 1 million suicides a year that are grief-related, from the deep depression. And so I just decided to publish everything that I found out, and I did this by way of an audio, because at the time I never thought I was a writer, but I recorded just into my digital recorder something called How to Survive Grief, and it was a 70-minute audio. I bought the domain name survivegrief.com, which I still have. It's still there. And just as a free download, people can listen. I just thought I have to give away what I learned. So fast forward just a few months after I posted this, and all I did to promote it, because what do I know about promotions, is I told my Facebook friends. And in a very short period of time, 3,000 people had heard it worldwide. And emails started coming in, Michael, about how it eased the pain of grief, gave people hope when they understood what they were feeling. Like they understood, okay, a guilt stage is going to come through me. Okay, that's just what it is. It's a normal part of the healing process. And people used my suggestions to work through the grief and heal faster. And the aha moment to finally answer the question you asked me 10 minutes ago was why I wrote the book, is people started reporting that they were suicidal, that they had their exit strategy planned, and by hearing my words, they understood they were in such a dark place because of grief, and they could relate to the stages and what I knew they were thinking. And one man actually looked me in the eyes after he heard it, and he told me how he was going to go, and it was all planned, and it wasn't even from a death of a loved one. It was his wife had cheated on him with another man, so he was grieving the loss that way. And he said, Sandra, when I heard your words, he says, it was as if you knew exactly what was in my head. And he says, so that's when I realized it must be grief. And he says, I took your steps to get out of it. And I'm happy to report that he's madly in love with a woman now, and he's engaged to be married. And so enough of those emails started coming in. And then I thought, I can't not share this with the world. And, what's the best way to impact millions of lives? And that's to have a best-selling book. So Michael, God is my witness. I don't want to be known as the grief lady, because I'm very positive. I'm all about living life. But I also knew this was the time if I could be courageous, because what is mankind's biggest fear is death. And I thought if I could have a book, entitle it We Don't Die, and provide my journey of life after death, it's just one simple chapter on grief, because I think people need to hear it, and then ultimately how to play full out while we're here on planet Earth. I thought, yeah, that's the book.
Yeah,
so that's why I wrote it.
Well, that's great, and books like yours are important because I wish I had something like this. When my mom was sick, and I referenced my mother because that was the closest loss I've ever had, and
Right.
there's a feeling of helplessness Just, you could be there for them, but there's nothing you can do about it. You know what's going to happen. It's inevitable. You know they know it. And you try to hold on to this hope, but you feel so helpless. And then you get your hands on, say, a book like We Don't Die, and if that helps, God bless, because it's any little thing helps in those times of really helplessness. It's the only way I know how to explain it. And you're right, me and my siblings, we had a few little squirrels too, because my dad, he's up there in years. My parents were married for 48 years. And
Wow.
yeah, so we're all thinking, well, what's Dad gonna do without Mom? And of course,
Mhm.
I'm the youngest, so I got nominated. You should go live with Dad. So
Right.
to try to, I guess, to try to ease their own guilty feeling that Dad's gonna be alone. It'd make them all feel better if they pushed, little brother to
Right.
Dad's house, that kind of thing. So
It's
everybody feels,
hard.
yeah, it is.
It's hard.
It is, and you said how the one thing that man fears most is death. I was thinking about that while you were talking, and we've been given the ability to understand that one day our physical bodies are going to die. So with that, why shouldn't we research and try to figure out the mystery of what happens after we die? Because me and myself, I've had a few out-of-body experiences, uncontrolled, just happened, and that
Wow.
gave me um, comfort knowing that there is something outside of this physical body. And I wish everybody can have an experience like that, because before that you are kind of skeptical. You're thinking, well, what if there is nothing? What if this is it? And for people who are stuck in that realm of thinking, I think your book would help them out a lot.
Yeah, because before I even address the my journey, one of the things I feel very passionate about is letting people know who's living in their head. And I say this playfully, but some people call it the inner critic. Some people call it the committee, the negative Nancy. I call it the voice. And we can all relate to that there is this phenomena inside of our heads when we wake up in the morning. There's things like we're not good enough, we're too fat, we're ugly, if we're single, it's nobody's ever going to love me. It causes us to be fearful. We didn't have it when we were little kids, when anything was possible. And then sooner or later, maybe you're a kid and you raise your hand in class and somebody says, well, that was a stupid answer. Well, this little voice starts talking, and it says stuff like, well, you're stupid. Now, unfortunately, it doesn't just say it once. It continues for the rest of your life. So here I am 47, and I've got this little voice in my head that just won't quit, all negative all the time, very, very rarely saying anything good to me. In fact, I would never allow another human being to speak to me like I allow this little voice to speak to me. Now, the problem is we think that voice is us. And so when people come to me, and even me being the skeptic, um, it's I don't think it's our true selves asking the question and saying, you have no proof, there's no way, when this life is over, it's just what it is. I actually think in those moments it's that voice talking, because we get so used to life as we see it and feel it and experience it. And Albert Einstein once said, you can look at the world like nothing is a miracle or everything is a miracle. And when we take time to look at the stars, or even if you look at your own hand and try to figure out how our eyes work and how all that happens, and even looking at our hand, we're made up of molecules, and inside the molecules there's atoms. And quantum physics says if you put a camera inside one of our atoms, there would be no substance. All there is vibrating energy. So it's pretty miraculous, isn't it, that we're
Yeah.
just made up of energy. There's just nothing there. If you look up at the stars, this is a very rough estimate, someone told me, but there are 1 million stars like our sun for every grain of sand on this planet. Well, that's pretty mind-blowing, but our little voice in our head is just so used to seeing the stars, well, they're no big deal. Even at one time, this earth was just rock and grass and water and dirt, and now we have cell phones and satellites circling the globe. And none of us know how our television really works or a radio. A couple hundred years ago, if someone were to say that there'd be such things as automobiles and voices coming out of a box inside of a car, I mean, that would be impossible. The voice in their head would say, there's no way. But we get so used to it that they are no big deal. And so I don't think inherently that, I do think inherently that we all are kind of skeptical, and we're so used to living in this miraculous world that it's no longer a miracle. And so one of the things I want to wake people up to is that this little voice keeps talking and it really keeps trying to convince us of one thing. And if we can step back and quiet that voice, well, this whole nother miraculous world shows up.
Oh, I agree. It is, we are a miracle. I mean, you just, like you said, I mean, how our eyes work and how everything
Mm-hmm.
is just so intelligently designed. Overlooking that, I mean, and people do, I think would be a big mistake because we are more than this physical body that we drive around in. I mean, we're energy, like you said, and energy can't be destroyed.
It
So
can't be.
that's
Mm-mm.
right. Yeah. So
And people often ask me, Michael, where do I think heaven is? Because and I can get into my first experience when I actually studied with a medium trying to prove that it's impossible, only to have out of my own head telling accurate details of people's deceased loved ones. That was mind-blowing. But anyways, where is heaven? And I know that wherever you probably are, there might be wireless internet around you.
right.
There's radio waves. There's television waves. There's this invisible world that's made of energy. And we know this. This is not anything I'm making up. It's not far-fetched. It is real. And everybody can relate to it because obviously our phones are connected, even though there's not a wire in between. We're still talking right now. So energy can exist in the same place as other energy. So our bodies are made of energy, and meanwhile, I'm sitting here, and I've got the world of wireless internet happening around me. So it's energy on top of energy. Well, heaven, I like to use the word the hereafter because I believe, like you said, our energy never dies. Energy doesn't disappear. So the body might be gone, but the energy of that person lives in the same space as we are right now. And I think that's how it's possible for psychics and mediums and things like that for people to tap into this other world because it's happening right here. If
Yeah,
that makes sense.
I kind of see it as a different dimension, if you will. Like,
Right.
I don't know. That's just kind of how I look at it. Is and they cross sometimes. So that's why people
Mhm.
see ghosts and they'll see and they'll be able to connect, like you said. I know there's a lot of people out there who think that psychics, that's all nonsense, but there are some real ones. There are some really good ones. Matter of fact, I had one on last night, Helene Olson, and
Oh, that's fun.
yeah, it is, and and they prove themselves sometimes. They're not going to be perfect. They're not going to be 100%. It's not an easy thing to do. But I've had some on who I would put at about 80%, and I don't know what more you can ask outside of your own
Yeah,
experience.
right. I mean, we are still human beings, and can I share the story about when I first studied mediumship because it's
Please
pretty
do.
funny. It's
Sure. Please
funny
do.
and it's cool, but I'll just jump ahead that I think that um, we are like the receiver for when some of these messages come through, whether it's a psychic message or whether it's a medium thing. So everything gets passed through our minds and through the voice in our head and through our imagination. And I don't know how it is for psychics and mediums who are out there practicing in the world, but I know when I had my first medium experience, it looked identical to my imagination. So here's the story. I had the fear of dying, which led me to start dabbling in what else is possible. And I had an opportunity to see Dr. Doreen Virtue, who is pretty famous as far as medium. They call her the Angel Lady. She was a psychologist who actually started having these psychic hits and seeing a carjacking that was going to happen in her future. Of course, she blew it off thinking it's just in her imagination, but it happened just as she had seen it previously. And so I had seen her do a stage show, and she was talking about angels. And what fascinated me was when someone asked a question, she would tell them who their deceased loved one was, something really specific about them, not just the general, your grandmother's with you, and she says, I love you. I mean, it was very specific. And then there was always some really profound message. And so when I saw that happening, I was still in my skeptical mind thinking somehow, some way, these people were planted in the audience because they're going to try to sell me some book or there's some sale coming. So at the end of the performance, there was no sell. There was no nothing. It was just simply over. And the tickets were reasonable. And I thought, well, then why were they there? Why did they do that? Unless she really did see people. So given that I had the fear of dying, I had to know more. I looked online, and Doreen Virtue had a weekend course she was offering in mediumship. And at the end of 3 days, you would be someone who could effectively tell the deceased people around others. So my fear of dying so wanted it to be true. My skeptical brain was saying, there's no way someone can teach that course. But who won was my fear of dying, and I booked myself a ticket to go to this private retreat she had. I spent more money than I even had and, charged the credit cards, but I had to know. If somebody's going to make that claim, I mean, I had, whatever it was, I had to know one way or the other. So when I got there, I felt very out of place. A lot of the people there had like the angel gowns on, kind of looked a little gypsy-like, and there I was wearing my khaki pants and my polo shirt and thinking, oh boy, I don't fit into this group. And everybody seemed nice, though, so I thought, well, I'll go with this. And the first thing she had us do is she talked a little bit about mediumship and how it works. And she says, we're just going to play right now. We're not really going to do a medium reading. But she says, I just want to show you how it's done. So she says, everybody grab a partner. So I picked a woman. I've never seen any of these people before. And she says, I want you to sit in your chairs knee to knee, hold hands. One person go first. And so I said, well, I'll go first. And she says, all I want you to do, because, again, Michael, we're not really doing it. This is how it will be done once we get the training, is she said, I want you to close your eyes and imagine that there's somebody standing behind your partner. And if it's on the left side of that person, that means it's on the mom's side. If it shows up on the right side, that's her dad's side. And then exactly where they're standing, it could be grandma, grandpa. But she says, for this, just pretend there's someone there and just make up a fictional person. And she says, all there is to do is tell the story, who you see, if there's any details, any thoughts come to mind, and then there's usually some profound message at the end. So because she gave me the free will to make up a person, I did. So I told the woman I was with, my partner, that it was her grandfather on her mom's side, because it appeared on a certain side, and I gave him the name Jan. I said he was a fisherman in Denmark. I said he had blue eyes, really windburned skin, blonde hair, a big gap between his front teeth. He died of lung cancer, and he never told your mom that he loved her. He worked hard, and he just, whatever the reason was, he really wanted her to give her mother the message that she was loved. So I opened my eyes, like, okay, it's your turn to go. And she's crying. Her grandfather, Michael, his name was Jan. He was a fisherman in Denmark. He died of lung cancer. He fit that description. And he never told his daughter that he loved her.
Wow.
Me telling this. This is, again, the skeptic who thought I was making the whole thing up. Yeah, that's a wow. Right. Because my rational mind, the voice in my head, could not figure out how that's possible other than that man must have really been there. Yeah. And so I decided to throw that voice out the window for 3 days. And I wasn't correct all the time, though, only 30-40% of the time. And when I was correct, I was really correct. And when I was wrong, I was really wrong. So that's what told me that sometimes it is my imagination and sometimes it's the real deal.
And some people are able to get a good grip on that, and they become really good at it.
And I think it's practice.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think that if you could make 35%, and you kept practicing, I'm sure you have the ability to get up there near 80%. So.
Oh, sure. But that wasn't what I wanted to do. I wanted to, at that point, it's like, what else can I find? And so that led me into just so many other worlds, really researching near-death experiences. And, for me, who was so skeptical that just thought it's the brain shutting down. And, of course, there's the white light and hearing music. Oh, that's just the brain shutting down. Where there's a doctor named Kenneth Ring who made his practice studying blind people who never had vision, never. And they could float above their bodies and detailed images, see colors people were wearing, seeing what their spouse was wearing. One woman saw her husband bend over and pick up the doctor's pen when it had fallen out of his hand, and he was wearing his green shirt. I mean, very, very specific. And these people blind always. So easy for us to say, no, it's not possible. But I wanted to take all the people, not all the people, but lots of the people that are out there now, whether they're in medicine or science or whatever, and tell their stories of, and what else is out there besides what so much of us know as far as life after death. Put it all together in one place.
Right. And, when my mom was sick, going back to that again, one thing that happened that really stands out is, when people say, oh, it's the brain, they're on medications, and that's why these things happen. Well, my mom was of sound mind. It was a few days before her death. And she looks at my dad and she says, Eddie, if you took your medication, make sure you take your medications. At the time, he's in his late 70s, and he's on blood pressure pills and things. And I mean, so totally sane mind. And then she looks at me, make sure your father takes his pills. Then she stops, she looks up, and she says, the angels are here. Do you see the angels are here? And we just looked at each other like, wow, and I'm thinking, I hope they are there. But, I don't. And she went right back after that to normality. I mean, so.
Right.
Yeah.
The angels were there. There's so many stories of that. One of my day job is I'm a chef for race car teams. So I wasn't always an author. So I still travel and I cook for these race car teams all over the country. And under my food tent, because I work with my mom and we set up a giant tent and there's breakfast, lunch, dinner buffets all the time during a race week. And now I put up a little banner and it's a picture of my book, We Don't Die, and then I have a book table, so I sign books at the racetrack. Kind of fun. Well, one of the race car drivers is now a radio and television announcer, so he's retired. And he saw the title of my book, and he came over and he said, Sandra, I've never told anyone this. But he said in the 70s, he says, I was actually in a car crash that I went into the hospital and died on the operating table. And briefly, flatlined and all that. And then he says, then I went into a coma. He said, my experience was going to a place, and he says, my grandparents were there to meet me. He said, there were colors that I can't even describe because I've never seen them here. It was so real that it made life on Earth seem just like a dream. And he said, I knew I was safe. There was no pain. It was great. Grandma and Grandpa were there. But then he said, then I kind of hovered over my body, and he said, my mom, my dad, and my brother were all there so sad and praying for me. So he said, I made the decision that, no, I need to be on Earth. And so he said, next memory he had, he woke up in his body. He was in a ton of pain, but he still remembered being with his grandparents in this other place. So he said that took away his fear of dying. Well, why this story is important is because this man went on to race in some of the biggest races of the world, and he won championship upon championship. And why he told me he did is he says, because there was no fear of dying, I didn't fear living.
Oh.
So not that he wanted to die in a crash or anything, but he put his foot on the pedal and drove a little bit faster and took more risks than the others, and that's why he won. And I started thinking about this. If I can tell my story, I'll get into this in a minute, but I teach people something called remote viewing, which is an ESP technique.
Yeah.
And when people can effectively do that, it's like we have to be something else. There's no way you can do this remote viewing and not have goosebumps and not say, oh my gosh, how could I just do that? Well, I thought if I could create under one roof this book, We Don't Die, and give people some of these experiences, give them the understanding and the belief that we really don't die, and talk about being human and how to get through some of our fears and things like that and go after our dreams. One, people would not have all those regrets when the end is near. Two, they'd have a much better quality of life while we're here. And three, they would be like my race car driver friend. If you don't really fear dying and not fear living, there might be, this might be a shallow example, but, a lot of us have gotten our hearts broken, and it's hard for us to approach somebody that we like or that we want to ask out on a date. Well, maybe that edge will be taken off, and that person will have the confidence to ask the person. Or maybe there's a job that you want, or you want to ask for a raise, or something new you want to do, or there's something you fear that normally the voice is teaching us, don't say anything, it's never going to work out. But to not have that fear of dying and to know that you can't ever really fail, then you can step into those areas of fear. And then on the other side of fear, there's always some new action. There's some new result. Something new will happen. Something good will happen when we can get through that discomfort zone. And so that's the quality of life I want to give people. And that's where the fulfillment and the happiness takes place.
Absolutely. Now, for me, it's not the death part that scares me as much as the getting there that scares me. I'm suffering, and I'm no wimp or anything like that. But I'd hate to have a 6-month dragged out, painful, sick feeling kind of death. And
no.
We don't get to pick, so.
we don't, and we can hope. See, my dad went through what he went through, and the whole time I could not understand, no matter what I believe, and I do believe in God, but I couldn't understand why somebody would have to live through something like that. It was horrible. And my grandmother, on the other hand, she died quick, had a brain aneurysm and died. And so I thought, well, what is the reason for suffering? Now, I don't know, and that would be the biggest question I would have when it's my turn. But I do know that out of Dad's suffering came something ultimately, and even my suffering dealing with grief and the relationships with my siblings, my book, We Don't Die, would have never been written had things not gone exactly how they did. And I've talked to a lot of people that are now successful and now openly sharing their message or openly helping people. And it seems like out of the worst times of our life can come who we are and what we're meant to share and what we're meant to do.
Absolutely.
So
Everything happens for a reason, and
it does.
yeah, I've got some areas of my life growing up that I'm not so proud of. However, I wouldn't change anything because it led to who I am and what I'm doing now.
Exactly, exactly. And we can live life being a victim of our circumstances, and it's a miserable way to live. And we can also make the choice, what if I'm responsible for this? What if it was meant to go this way because of some other reason? I mean, even this could be a real basic example, but driving down the road, you might be late for work, and all of a sudden you get a flat tire. Well, you could spend a huge amount of energy being angry at that flat tire and really making yourself stressed out and all that. Or if we become responsible, well, when was the last time I checked my tires? Why did I choose this way to go to work? If I had done this, maybe this wouldn't have happened. And I'm not saying that it's the truth that we are responsible for everything, but it gets that voice in our head off, with no more stress of blaming and being a victim. When you can look at it from responsibility, you get over it pretty quick. And you say, okay, well, then how do I deal with this to have a change? So even in the case, and I hope neither one of us or anybody listening today has to deal with suffering, or people may be right now, but to look at, I don't want to say how it's a benefit because that, it hurts, but maybe look for what we can learn out of it.
You
That
know,
makes sense.
and at the same time, you could get that flat tire, and you could call
Uh-huh.
the boss to let him know you're going to be late. He fires you. You start to walk down the highway, and you get hit by a car. I mean, there could be bad things to that delay too.
Oh, I know. You just never know. But ultimately, I want to empower people. And one of the big things, I brought up the voice, earlier. But when that sucker keeps talking, I mean, it's brutal. And so I offer to people not only a way to get the voice to stop, is one of the best ways to ease the pain of grief. It is to ease suffering, even to tap into this mind that can remote view or can see our deceased loved ones, any of that. It has to be in the present moment. When we can be so present and not listening to that voice in our head and just be 100% where we are, focusing maybe on one thing, whether it's our breath, maybe if it's just listening to music, maybe if it's just you have your dog or your cat that you're petting and you just concentrate only on that fur, or how it feels on your fingertips. It's in those moments that, healing happens, especially if you're grieving, that you can have some moments that you're not experiencing pain. And also that whole world of the divine is what I call it, remote viewing, the psychic stuff, getting those, hits in your imagination, like your deceased loved ones are with you. That all happens when your mind is quiet. So that's something I feel very passionate about with people, is helping them. And it can only be, sometimes only for a couple of seconds, because you know as well as I do that mind just wants to keep talking. And it's kind of a muscle to build, but in that place is where the magic occurs.
Talk about remote viewing for a moment, if you would. Maybe a quick description of what it is for those who don't know, and what can be accomplished with remote viewing. I've heard a lot about it. I've talked to people who claim they've done it. And is this something that's easily learned? Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, it's very easily learned. When I first had heard about it, I heard only people that have had a near-death experience could do it. And I thought, well, I don't like that. I want to know. Well, I found out about remote viewing, which is an ESP technique, to answer your question. It is something, if you and I are miles apart and you had a shoebox in front of you and you had something hidden in that shoebox, my mind, when I remote view, I might not be able to tell you what the object is, but I can see my mind will pick up elements of that object. Just like when I was saying that I thought I was imagining this fisherman in Denmark named Jan, when we remote view, our mind can see, let's see, what's a good example of this? I did a remote viewing experiment with a Facebook group that I have, and it's a bunch of folks that had lost a loved one and were grieving, and I was going through some of the elements of Inside We Don't Die, and I had a brown paper bag that I just took a picture of the outside of this brown paper grocery bag. Now, inside of it was a porcelain doll, and it looked like Victorian age. She had a green dress on. She had curly red hair. She had a hat with a little bow on it. She had white shoes. There was a mesh, I don't even know what you call it, underneath her dress that made her dress fluffy, and she had blue eyes. So all the people saw in the Facebook group was the picture of the outside of the bag. And so to remote view, it really is quieting the mind, and the mind's going to say, remote viewing's not true, this isn't possible. I mean, it just doesn't shut up. And so the idea is to just say, okay, fine, you can believe that, that's fine, but what if this was true? And if you can quiet that voice and just have the intention, if I knew what was inside that bag, well, what would be in it? And so have a notepad in front of you, and it usually takes about 15 minutes to quiet the mind enough. And there's a ton of fear that happens because we don't want to get it wrong, but you have to be really willing to play, and it's okay to be wrong. Well, your mind, your imagination will be spitting up all kinds of images. And so the homework is just have a notepad and just write down what the mind comes up with. So I had my Facebook group do this, and so people would write in and say, one person saw like a young girl, one saw blue eyes, one saw curly red hair, somebody saw a white bow, another one saw white shoes, another one said something like a tea bag, but it's like white mesh. Green, the color green was mentioned a lot of times, which is, of course, what the dress was. And there were other images, a lot with the curl and like a corkscrew. Someone saw that. And so no one could put it together that this was a porcelain doll, but the remote viewing mind somehow saw those elements. And only those elements. It wasn't, and so we did the experiment again, and I took a picture of my backyard on my iPhone. I printed the picture, I put it in an envelope, and I just took a picture of the outside of the envelope. Well, this time, people were writing, they saw grass, they saw birds, they saw lawn chairs, they saw, red flowers. These are all elements in my backyard. And then another time I did the example that I had hidden in the bag. It was a jewelry box that my grandmother had. It was clear, it's glass, and then it was connected by metal. And inside of it, Michael, it was just filled with chains, gold chains and silver chains. So nothing too extraordinary, but, we were playing, and I just wanted to see. Because now these people are so wowed, because obviously I reveal what was in the picture or revealed the picture of the doll, and they were mind blown. Well, for this one, people could see gold, they could see silver, they could see chains. The base of this jewelry box, it looked like wheels. And so somebody said it looks like gold wheels, which that was certainly an element of it. But the neatest thing was somebody saw the bust of Abraham Lincoln. And I thought, well, that's obviously their imagination because that's not in the box. Well, guess what? One of those chains connected to a tiny little locket. And inside that tiny little locket was a miniature penny with the bust of Abraham Lincoln.
Oh, good.
So when that happened, I am sitting here with goosebumps because that happens all the time. Even if you don't have a partner to remote view with, you go buy a magazine that you've never looked at before, and you can do the same thing. Quiet the mind, have the intention, have the notebook in front of you, and will you come up with some images that aren't in there? Absolutely. But when you are really specific and you can see whatever it might be inside, and you start going through those pages and things that came to your mind within 30 seconds or a minute, and you start flipping through those magazines, and 70, 80, 90% of the pictures you just saw in your mind are in that magazine. It brings this whole world of we are much more powerful than we know ourselves to be. It makes it real for us. It makes that psychic thing possible.
So
It's mind-blowing.
are we actually sending our third eye on a journey? I mean, is that what's happening, or is it the spirit energy in us that is traveling? Do we know?
I don't know. I really don't know. But you know, I think that we are all, well, we all believe that our souls, when we get to heaven, most of us anyways, that's a pretty magical place, you know, and that souls of our loved ones can easily be here with us now, and then they can easily jump and be somewhere else. Well, I think that we are that same soul stuff. It's just that we also have this body attached to us now that restricts us from being, you know, remembering who we really are. And we have time and space and matter here on planet Earth, which I don't think in the hereafter we do. So there's limitations. I mean, and so to have that experience, whoever we really are, the soul, the spirit, whatever you want to call us, that's all we're doing is we're picking up on these things. And it's even things like the power of prayer. There's so much documentation about people that are prayed for heal faster than those that don't. And so it's not just picking up on things from outside sources. It's also sending things to outside sources. You know how sometimes you think the same thoughts as somebody you're with?
Yeah. And,
Yeah.
people do it all the time online. Somebody will say, oh, my uncle this or my aunt that. And everyone will say, I'm sending you healing energy. And,
Right.
some people laugh at that. Some people just write it. But if people actually do it, there is something to it. There's something to that prayer. There's power there. I don't know what it is. I
Mm-hmm.
can't explain it. But, boy, it is powerful.
It's real. And I took a course called Dowsing with a guy named Joey Korn back several years ago. And, you see these pictures of the old-timers that can use a divining rod or stick or something, and they can find the underground streams of water, and they can find wells, and then, okay, that's where you should have your house built because here's the water source. And I thought that was fascinating, so I took a course on that, and because I love to learn some of these things, I really do. And I have a pair of dowsing rods, and they just look, people can do this with coat hangers, but the dowsing rods can open and close based on the energy they pick up. So we were trained how to find underground streams of water.
That is fascinating.
It's fascinating. And here's something cool too. I'm jumping around, but it's just like I just want to share everything I know with you right now. A friend of mine, well, he wasn't a friend. He was somebody who read We Don't Die, who never thought in a million years he'd buy into any of this kind of talk. Well, he was so curious. He read We Don't Die, and he said it changed his life. And he happens to be a filmmaker. And so he flew to my house in Massachusetts and spent 2 days with me, and he interviewed me about why I wrote We Don't Die and what my journey was. And then the most favorite things he had that he loved were the conversations like Where is Heaven, the remote viewing, dowsing, electronic voice phenomena. So he actually he created a documentary about me, which is just a couple of weeks old. And I have the website WeDon'tDie.com, and you can see the trailer for it there. And we're charging a couple bucks for it because, of course, he made it, so I thought he should be reimbursed. But I actually do a dowsing example that people can see. And one of the things that I did, and this is just so cool, I tell this story in the book. This is the power of prayer and also the power of dowsing, is I had given a friend of mine some different Tabasco bottles when I had gone on a vacation. I think I went to Costa Rica. And so there was a set of, I think, 6 different kinds of hot sauces, but they were all in identical bottles, but they were slightly different flavors and temperature and stuff. And I had just wanted to experiment and see if this was possible. So I took one of the bottles and I blessed it, and I charged it. There's a certain way to say a prayer, a blessing, to infuse something with good energy, healing powers. And so, of course, the little voice inside of my head says, Sandra, you're just making this up. This isn't real. It never shuts up. But I didn't listen to it, and I just pretended that I had power, and I'm infusing this bottle with just love and healing power. And so I put a little sticker on the bottom of it, so I didn't know which bottle I had actually blessed. So then I put all the bottles out in front of me, and I mixed them all up. So I had no idea at this point now which bottle was the one I blessed and which one had the sticker on it. So then I took my dowsing rods, and one by one, I went over the bottles until one of the dowsing rods opened wide up, that's the one that had energy. So lo and behold, I turned the bottle upside down, and it had the sticker on it. Oh. So that was cool. Well, so the guy who wanted to make the documentary, he's got the camera, and he's here at my house, and he says, well, let's do that experiment. And so, of course, the voice in my head says, well, it worked once. It's not going to work again. And I said, well, okay, let's go for it, because a lot of the times I listen to the voice and I let it stop me, but I thought, you know what, I have nothing to fear here. And so I did the same thing, except for I took 4 water bottles, identical water bottles. I took the labels off, and one of them I just blessed. I infused with loving energy, and I'm just thinking, and this is what I say. It's just like, God, if it be your will, bless this water so that whoever drinks it is filled with energy and healing powers, and if this be your will, amen. So you always have to close the prayer with something. So I just infused this one bottle with energy, and so then I mixed them all up. There were 4 bottles. Oh wait, first I put a piece of Scotch tape on the bottom of the one that I blessed, so that I wouldn't know which one was the one. So then I mixed them all up, and so this is all captured on camera, I'm proud to say, because I go over the water bottles one by one, and sure enough, one of them opens with the fully charged energy. These dowsing rods open wide up, and I turn it over, and that's the one with the Scotch tape. So the dowsing rods, are they the magical ones? Nope. It's actually our bodies can pick up the energy, and it just somehow makes the signal to these dowsing rods to open it up. But sometimes people can go into a spot, and they just, like a lot of people call bad vibes. Oh, that guy gives me bad vibes. People can feel their energy's good, their energy's bad, and it's the same thing with the dowsing rods. We're picking up this energy, and so it's very much real.
Yeah, it's the same way our brain controls our movements. I mean, the brain sends energy signals.
Mm-hmm.
We move our hands and all this and that. I mean, so we are all energy, and that's a fantastic story.
It's fun to do.
That's why I worry sometimes about all the Wi-Fi and different microwave signals that are going through our airspace. Because I've told the listeners before, if you could see all the energy around you, Wi-Fi or what have you, you'd feel like you were wrapped up in saran wrap. I mean, there's so much. And I wonder how that affects our bodies. And maybe, I don't know, is there meditation or something that's good to get the energy balanced or something along them lines?
Yeah, definitely. When I learned dowsing, I learned that there are 3 kinds of energy. There's positive energy, negative energy, and just neutral energy. And it is simply by the power of a prayer and having the intention to turn negative energy into positive energy that we can change energy. And it sounds far-fetched, and to the skeptical mind, it's like, oh, come on, please. Because I'm even thinking that in my own head now, oh, what are these people going to think? But we did enough experiments blessing things, and some of this I really had to just trust Joey Korn, because he's made his life about learning about dowsing. And so to bless our world is filled with, whether it's the cell phones or the television, and there's all kinds of energy radiating off of things. But to take the time, and whether you put your hands up in front, like you're saying a prayer, or if you just have that intention of, the energy that's around me, and you think you don't have to speak it out loud, but if you actually, you just have to believe that you can do this and that you are doing it, and even if it seems made up, it's not. And just to you can imagine things maybe coated with a bubble of white light, white healing light around them, or the energy around you. Just bless it so that it's for your very best good, so that it's healing energy as opposed to harmful energy. And whether you believe in God, whether you don't, whether you just believe in whatever, just have some force that's bigger than yourself that infuse whatever it is with, healing positive energy. Say a prayer, and then just an amen, or if it be your will, or so let it be, or some way to close it. And you can shift energy from negative to positive. And I do have to trust that, you and I are both on this journey. Without our paths right now would have never intersected, and we would have never had this
Right.
conversation. And so, at this time in history, in 2013, we have all these things happening around us, to just somehow trust in progress that it's all happening as it should, for us to collectively now be able to inspire and enhance the lives of other people right now. So,
Good.
I'm
So
hoping there's no harm. But
yeah, so if we can, if we could bounce that energy from negative to good, then that means some people out there can get the tinfoil bodysuits and push those to a plan B. Take
yeah.
away from plan A.
Hey, have you ever seen the messages in water, or have heard about that?
Not the messages in water, but I've seen people use frequencies to actually make water boil. So I don't know if it's on the same length as that. Tell me about that message.
Okay, well, that sounds cool, whatever it is you're talking about, so you'll have to tell me that. But what this is there's a doctor in Japan, Dr. Emoto is his name, and it's talk about blessing and the power of energy, and how he decided to study it was using water. He had, in Japan, I don't remember what city, but he took some water droplets from a public water source, and he dropped them on little, like, petri dishes and froze them, just little droplets. And then under a microscope, when these droplets would start to thaw out, he saw that they formed all these different weird patterns. So they were really kind of weird patterns. And then he thought, well, what if I take water from some pristine water source? So he took water droplets from some ancient waterfall somewhere over there. And sure enough, after he put little droplets on the petri dishes and freeze them, and then under the microscope, well, these things, when they started to thaw, they formed beautiful snowflakes, beautiful crystal patterns. I mean, gorgeous. So then he starts thinking, well, one was like from a negative water source, one was from a positive source. Then he decided to try distilled water. And so he did the same experiment, and this distilled water showed no pattern when it started to thaw. So then he takes it one step further, and he decides to put bottles of water with the distilled water, and he puts positive words on them, like love and family and hope, faith. So he leaves these bottles of water with these positive words set a few days, and then he does the same experiment. Well, the distilled water, which had no pattern, now has beautiful snowflake crystals when it thaws. So that's cool. So then he takes bottles of water and he puts hate, fear, war, those kind of words. And then when these water droplets thaw, well, all these like negative, really weird, troublesome patterns formed. He did the same thing, taking this neutral water and subjecting it to beautiful music, and then angry music, some of the real rough, rock and roll and hardcore rap and things like that. And so the same thing happened. Water would have the beautiful versus beautiful crystals versus the nasty ones. So then he actually took the water droplets that had these negative patterns, and then he had people pray over them, and with just the power of their thoughts, bless this water and really good things. And it turns the negative, these ugly patterns, into the snowflakes, and vice versa. So this is all like this energy in water. And so, just like the power of our thoughts and prayers and words and things, so it's very important to speak positively. And the coolest thing was he had families all over Japan participate in this. And he had them boil a pot of rice. And then he had them divide the rice into two and have 2 jars of rice. One jar went in one room, one jar went in the other room. And so in one room, they were just to pray over the rice, only say positive things in that room, like literally love the rice. And then in the other room, and with the other jar, it was all negative thoughts, negative words, all, for this other rice. Well, at the end of the month, and this, thousands and thousands of families participated. At the end of the month, the rice that was loved turned this like light brown color, and then when people opened it up, it actually smelled like nutty, is how they described it. And then the people that, the other room with the rice that the negative stuff was said to, it turned black and it smelled foul. Wow. So when my dad, this is just bringing this home, my dad, no matter how much he believed, and I told him everything that I learned about life after death, and he had me promise I write a book, and so that's another reason that We Don't Die came to be. But alone in his own thoughts is, any one of us alone in our own thoughts is not often a good place to be. And so I had a picture of Dr. Emoto's experiment of the 2 jars of rice, one black and the other one light brown, and I had that right next to his bed, so he could always see it. Even when I wasn't in the room with him, I tried to be with him as much as I could when he was awake, just to keep positive things going in his mind. But he would look at that as a reminder to actually take the time to switch the thinking from fear and negative to start thinking about maybe gratitude, some things that made him happy, or putting on positive music or something like that.
I see. Well, that is fantastic. And, energy frequency is so powerful. I mean, like I was telling you, there was a guy, there is a guy who was demonstrating in videos how he was making water boil with mere frequencies. There's another gentleman who was using sound frequencies, I think, to keep his cancer in check. And it worked for a long time before, unfortunately, he was told he couldn't use that equipment no more.
Right.
But then there's another man by the name of John Hutchinson who was able to levitate objects with frequencies. And I think that's one of the big secrets is that, frequencies, we can heal with them. We can change moods. I mean, look at music, what music does.
Mm-hmm.
How it can take you back in time to a time in your life. Just the power of that. Yeah, so there's a lot of interesting stuff out there. And, we talk sometimes about unidentified flying objects here. And I think that has something to do with that as well. I mean, these objects are able to create their own gravity fields, and they do it through a frequency of some sort.
We have no idea what's possible. I mean, given that we're here, I think it's pretty shallow-minded to think others can't be. And you bring up UFOs, and I don't know much about the world of UFOs. It was never something that I read too much of. But my dad was an airline pilot for American Airlines, a captain for 30-something years. And he had the greatest story that, I mean, and it wasn't like he believed in UFOs, not like he didn't, but he said, no kidding, he and the co-pilot and the engineer all looked up and they saw something right outside their window with the lights, and it was bright and it hovered, and of course it scared the heck out of them because it didn't show up on any radar screen or anything, and then it quickly just disappeared as fast as it showed up. They all saw it. There was no sign of it. It was not like an aircraft that was heading towards and hitting them. And it was able to change direction very quickly. But my dad, and God bless him, he always taught me to just not to he taught me to question things, never to just believe what I've been told. Have those questions and that things are possible. So that's the only time I know UFOs in my life. But I just thought that's a pretty cool story.
Yeah, and I thank you for sharing that with me because I am into the UFO topic. I'm so interested in it because just like the other side and spirits, I feel like maybe that's another dimension. Maybe that's where they come from. So I'm very fascinated by it all. So I thank you for sharing that one with me. We've had so many who have been in the military who tell us stories about these objects that they see in the sky, and even some of them had chased these things, and there was no contest. They just, boom, they're gone.
Yeah.
So.
And why not? Isn't there? I don't remember what I heard on the radio not too long ago, but there's some kind of probe or something that we sent out in the 70s that's finally, I don't even know, 40 years later, it's transmitting now. It's just getting to the outskirts of our solar system or something. I don't know. Whatever it is, it's just the fact that it's taken 40 years, and it's only still in our solar system or wherever it is.
It's actually on the edge. It's in the process of actually leaving our solar system now, and I mean that is fascinating. And that's if they share with us what they really get back. It should be fascinating. That'd be interesting to see. I mean, because if we can spot another planet that say has satellites floating around them, well, we've got our confirmation, don't we?
We sure do. And I don't know if you saw the BBC show called Hyperspace, is what it's called. And the actor,
I don't think I did.
The actor Sam Neill was the voice in it. But it talks about and really gives some awesome graphics of the vastness of the universe. And I bought the DVD of it. It was a whole bunch of episodes that were put onto one DVD. And so I couldn't help it, one right after the other, after the other, after the other, about how far our universe is. I mean, obviously it's endless, but just how small our solar system is compared to all of it. And it's like, you just can't fathom that. I mean, it goes so far out of our understanding, and even this, that it's taken 40 years to get just that far.
Well, and that kind of leads us back to we don't die. Perhaps these are like a series of classrooms. Maybe when we're done here, we head to the next solar system and, a new lesson.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's really interesting because this is a very playful story, but people have asked, well, what's the point of being on Earth? Well, this is Sandra Champlain's idea. But I tell people to imagine being in heaven, however we can imagine heaven. Maybe it's a place in the clouds, and there's all good all the time. I mean, you just think of your favorite thing or favorite thing you want to eat or your favorite music. It's just all good all the time. And so there's only one problem with that. When you're floating there for eternity, it gets pretty boring. I mean, just think I don't know, what's your favorite food, Michael? Do you have a
favorite food? I would have to say it's toss off between three things. I love my pizza. I love my roast beef and mashed potatoes. And I'm definitely a big pasta guy. I like ravioli, stuffed shells, and all that stuff.
Okay, well, we'll take pizza just for an example. If pizza was all you got to eat forever, and that's it, nothing else, just pizza. In the beginning, of course, we would, especially a kid listening would be like, oh my gosh, that would be the best. Well, after a while, pizza's not so special anymore. So I like to say playfully that, and again, this helps me live a good life, but this place in the clouds, it's great, but after a while, it's boring. And so in the beginning of We Don't Die, I tell this what-if story. What if this soul all of a sudden, it keeps looking for something different, something new, and no, can't find it, just all good all of the time. Well, there's this line that forms, like a line when Space Mountain first came out at Disney World, and everybody's jumping in line, and the soul asks another soul, well, what's this line for? Oh, haven't you heard? It's planet Earth. It's not boring. Now, here's the thing. You're going to forget that you're a soul and that you've been here in heaven. But when you get there, you get these things called emotions. And there's good ones, and there's bad ones, and then there's fear, and there's pleasure. And then there's these experiences you get to go on. And there's these things that you can learn. And so, again, very playfully, I say that we just forget who we really are. We've come here on earth to learn, to love, to forgive, to experience. I think for me, everything that we learn, we grow. Like you said, you've made mistakes. I certainly have made a ton of mistakes, but I needed every one of those things to happen for me to be where I am right now, for that growth to happen. So what if this is a place that we're learning and we're growing and we're learning, and why not? And it's a great way to live life. Is it the truth?
Oh,
I'll have to get back to you on the next in our next incarnation. I don't know, but I do know, there's people that have read We Don't Die, and they have not had to have a near-death experience to now be going after their dreams, to now be saying things to people they normally wouldn't say, to forgive, to love more deeply. One lady got into just the beginning of the second chapter, and she had this ha-ha moment that she knew why she was not satisfied in life and what she's really meant to be doing in her life. That's pretty cool. The letters keep coming in about the people that have, obviously from the grief section, have less pain and more hope and believe their loved ones are with them. And, one poor lady had locked herself in the house for 5 months after her husband passed, and now she's realized that life's short. What does she want to do? She's out taking country line dancing classes, and I told this story. One of my race car drivers, he wasn't even interested in the book title or grief. He bought a book simply to support the chef, me. Mm-hmm. Well, he read it, and he said it is the most motivating, feel-good book, getting you in touch with what your dreams are and giving you access to go after them. Well, this guy owns a car dealership in Texas. He ordered 3 cases. He gives them to everybody, and he's now winning races. Now, is it because of We Don't Die? I don't know.
Maybe.
But it may be, but maybe not. I don't know. But
it's that positive energy.
Yeah, there's some way of living life that is so much more fuller and better, and it just feels good when you don't have that fear just lingering over you. And it can be fear of anything. not just fear of dying, but I mean, we all experience fear. The only way to have a new result in your life is to take a new action. I always tell people that, and often we're stopped from taking a new action because we're afraid. So it's just, you know,
Yeah.
getting through that fear.
One thing I've learned in my life, and some people will say, oh, you've taken some chances, and weren't you afraid of this and afraid of that? Well, yeah, sure. There's always that fear, but you've got to overcome it. You've got to take that chance because you'll never know unless you do it. And, in my case, doing this show, at first it was just a hobby, and then it became this
Right.
mission, this wanting to know and wanting to share what I find out with everybody. And I took a chance. I moved to South Carolina. I came here with a tent on my back and spent 5 days
Wow.
in a tent and got established and started doing this radio show. And well, here I am. So, I'm not living La Vita Loca by no means, but I'm happy, and that's what.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's a question I have for you and for anybody. When you can, like you created this show out of nothing and
Hmm.
you took a chance, and ultimately what you're doing is you're making a difference in other people's lives because you're educating us. It's very thought-provoking, very healing, entertaining to be sure. But is your life better because you created this show for others?
It feels better. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know as though it depends on how you measure it. Some people measure success by, I don't know, houses, cars, and money. And that, in a
Oh,
sense, no, not at all.
no.
But it feels
But
better.
but the joy of your life is better because you're making a difference for others.
Absolutely, and that's what
Yeah.
keeps me going. And people will send in emails and tell me how I've changed their way of thinking, or that how they love the show and they listen every night and it's changed their life in some way. And I'm excited to hear that. I mean, we have doctors who will come on with natural cures for different things, and when I get an email from somebody who says I was able to save my aunt or my uncle or my brother or my
Oh.
because of that information, it makes it all worth it, and I know that
Mhm.
is my purpose. So.
Well, even me with the book We Don't Die, it hit number one on Amazon in the grief category, which is huge in both the United States and Canada, and it hit top 4 motivational book just under Dr. Phil and Anthony Robbins, and that stuff's huge. But the truth is, I think I only make $1.58 on every book that's sold. So it's not like it's making me rich or anything, but what it's doing, it's enhancing the quality of people's lives. And would I like to sell millions of copies? Yes, of course. But it's enhancing the quality of people's lives, and gosh, that feels good. And I think um, now you may or may not have experienced this, but the more good that I do and I take the focus off Sandra Champlain and all my baggage and things that, the debt I have or what I still haven't done. But if I start turning it and making a difference for other people, suddenly I've had some really awesome, like coincidences or miracles, synchronicities, whatever you want to call them, that have shown up. So when I make it about other people and sharing to make a difference, suddenly it's like my life is working out. And I mean, I've had some really cool things happen. And so when I put that together with the ability to remote view and some of the things I've done with the life after death studies, it's like, yeah, that makes sense. I'm just pushing some good energy out, and it just happens to be coming back.
Right. And, I didn't get into this thinking, oh, I'm going to make $1 million. You certainly didn't get into this thinking you're going to get rich. And
No.
we're not doing what we're doing, but, we're helping people, in which makes us, I feel rich. I don't have money, but I'm rich. I'm rich inside. I
Yeah.
feel good about myself and what I do every day. And,
Yep. And
no,
I'd like the money to follow. Don't get me
sure.
wrong, but I also think I'm not the type person that, I mean, maybe I'd drive a car that didn't break down as often or something. But I also know myself to be someone that if you had a lot of money, I'd give a lot of money. I'd help with so many things that are happening in the world, and and so sometimes you need money to get the message out there to
Yeah.
make more of a difference.
I know I've
Um,
seen people hit that Powerball for 400 million, and I'm thinking if I had that money, I would still live as I do. Yeah, my house is
yeah.
a little nicer, which wouldn't be hard to upgrade. But but other than that, I mean, I would help people. I mean, you can't take it with you, and there's so many people out there who are multimillionaires or billionaires, and they do nothing but serve self. And I mean, they're out there, and for those people, I feel sorry for them. And
Hey,
me, I would
I've got
help, help, help.
I've got something funny to tell you. I don't mean to interrupt you,
Oh no, it's all right.
but you said you can't take it with you, and that reminded me. There came a point that before my dad died, I had to tell him about all the life after death stuff that I've dabbled in, and I was petrified because here was my dad that went to church every single day, Catholic Mass, and I'm going to start telling them that I see dead people right now. I'm thinking, how do I do that? My dad was an airline pilot, and I thought, there's no way. And then it's like, okay, Sandra, are you going to let fear stop you, or are you just going to look this man in the eyes and tell him the truth? So I told Dad my story, some of, learning from Doreen Virtue and everything, and poor Dad's just looking at me like, I love you, but this sounds a little crazy. Well, all of a sudden, on the radar screen of my imagination, I saw a yellow Piper Cub airplane with black letters and numbers on it in my imagination. Michael, it came out of nowhere. So then I feel like there's a man laughing, saying, I did get to bring my toys with me. You're wrong. I did get to bring my toys with me.
Yeah.
Now, I have no idea where this came from. So I said to my dad, I said, Dad, something's happening right now, and I just feel like I need to tell you about it. So I told him about the airplane, the laughter, that I did get to take my toys with me. My father, my strong father that I very rarely saw him cry, burst into tears. He had a friend who had cancer, who owned a yellow Piper Cub with the black letters. And my dad tried to help him visualize and do all kinds of alternative things, plus, go through traditional chemotherapy and radiation. But my dad kept saying to this man, you can't die. You can't hold on to life because you don't get to take your toys with you. So that it came out of my mouth that this man's laughing and saying, I did get to take my toys with me. And he had that airplane. That really sealed the deal for my father. And then Dad, at that point, he wanted to listen to everything I had to say, because if that was possible, there's no way I could have known that. And, so it just opened up. So who knows?
That's the case.
Take your toys.
When I pass away, I will be broadcasting from the other side.
That's a good name. It's a good title for something.
Yeah, that would.
I don't know what, but broadcasting from the other side.
I bet I'd have the best ratings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, with all the frequencies and everything. Sure, why not?
Yeah.
So, why not?
I've got a couple more questions for you here before we finish up tonight. I know the listeners would be very interested. Out of all the research you've done, what would you say the best evidence that you have, fallen upon that we do not die? What is it for you that most says we don't die?
For me, it would be when I took the course in something called electronic voice phenomena, EVP. It is, I had gone again to learn about something new. Let me just back up a little bit, because I think we have time to do that.
We do.
On my adventure of what else is possible, I wanted to know why sometimes I would get these psychic hits and know about people's deceased loved ones, and sometimes I couldn't. So I wanted to know, is there a way that I can perfect this? And so I went into a Barnes & Noble, and I was in, usually an area I wouldn't be caught dead in, about all this spiritual stuff. But I found a bright orange book, and it's called The Idiot's Guide to Communicating with Spirits. So I loved the title. I bought the book. Within the book, it's written by Reverend Rita Berkowitz, and Reverend Rita is a minister in spiritualism, which is, I don't know if you're familiar, but a lot of the practicing things that Christians have. But the difference is after the Mass, the ministers come out and they will tell the parishioners who the deceased loved ones are, and they'll give messages from beyond. And spiritualism dates back a couple hundred years. It's not a New Age church by any means. And so Reverend Rita, within the pages of this book, had, when she worked with a client, she not only could see the person because she's a medium, but she's an artist, so she drew pictures of the people. So inside the book were pictures as people lived, and then Reverend Rita's drawings of them. And Michael, they were the same people. So I was really intrigued by spiritualism, by Reverend Rita. I wanted to go to a spiritualist church just to see what this is all about. And lo and behold, when I looked in the back of the book to try to find a spiritualist church, Reverend Rita and her church were only 45 minutes away from me in Quincy, Massachusetts. So that's another one of those great moments that I felt like I was led on a journey. So I went to one of her masses, and it was brilliant. And most of the congregation were senior citizens. These are not young people looking for medium readings. This is people's faith. And so I met with Reverend Rita, and this is long before I even imagined having a book, but she foresaw with me that not so much that I'd write a book, but that I'd help people believe in life after death and who I was meant to be, and I'm a healer and a leader and all this stuff. And I'm thinking, nah, not me, nah, somebody else maybe, not me. I don't really even believe in all this stuff. Well, she invited me back the next week, and she said, I have a guest minister here, and I think you'd really enjoy that. So I went back, and it was a husband and wife team that were up doing the service. Well, the wife does most of the service, and then the husband, at the very end, said, my wife was a spiritualist for 30 years, and I never got involved because I'm of scientific mind. If I can't see it and prove it, it's not real. So he says, I just thought this was the land of hoping, So he says, I got involved in this thing called EVP, electronic voice phenomena. Now, at the time, the horror movie White Noise had just come out. And he said, a lot of people have heard of EVP because of this movie. But he says, I'll have you know, messages that come through are usually positive and loving. All that negative horror stuff is Hollywood. And thankfully, people in the world now know about EVPs because of the movie, but don't be scared of it. But he says, I didn't really believe in it. And he says, I bought this book called There Is No Death and There Are No Dead by Tom and Lisa Butler. And he says, I bought myself a tape recorder. And you always need to have like this white noise on in the background, because he says the deceased using energy can rearrange voices or sounds and turn them into voices on a tape recorder. And so, my skeptical mind is thinking, oh, yeah, right. Oh, yeah. I mean, this is really far-fetched. And so he said, my wife and I each were married before to other people, and we both had children die. So he said, we left a fan on in our bedroom with the tape recorder recording, and we left the house. And he says, when we came back, and I want you to hear the message or the sound that was on the tape recorder. So he played it, and it just sent chills to my spine. There was the sound of laughter, and it sounded like children laughing. And it said, Daddy, don't be scared. We are still here with you.
Wow.
Yeah.
And
so yeah. And so here my mind, the voice was saying, that's impossible. But again, this guy's not asking me to buy anything. He's simply telling me his story. It all seems to make sense. And so for me, who had done the medium journey, I thought, because I was never going to tell anybody that I did the medium class, because if people said, well, Sandra, who do you see around me? And I got it wrong, then they'd laugh at me, and I'd lose friends, and people would think I was crazy. So I never wanted to tell them. But something else in me said, if I could learn whatever this EVP thing is, then maybe people will believe me, not just what I see in my mind, but they can hear something. So I had, and this is amazing, I bought the book by Tom and Lisa Butler. I actually sat in my living room and had a television station onto like a neutral channel, so all that was like the fuzzy background noise, and I tried to do a recording. And the little voice in my head spoke way too loud this time and said, you're a good Catholic girl. This has to be the devil's work. Put it down, put it down. And so I put that recorder in it was actually my underwear drawer, and I just shut it. For 3 months, I was not even interested in, that was a little too far-fetched, this EVP thing. That's something I shouldn't be playing with, and I convinced myself of that. So fast forward to, it was October of 2005, and I had just wanted to go on a retreat. I wanted massages. I was burnt out from work, and there's a place called the Omega Center in upstate New York, just a few hours from where I lived, that has nature walks, vegetarian food, because, I've always been big in overeating and battling my weight, and I thought, well, I'll just go for a weekend, kind of dry out from overeating, and, they always have some kind of a class you can take of different things. There's art classes, writing classes, all kinds of things. So I said, well, I'll find something, and I'll get a few massages. That will be great. So I looked for that weekend in October, and lo and behold, what course is being offered is Tom and Lisa Butler, Electronic Voice Phenomena. The first and only time they've been there just happened to be the weekend I was free, and I found it. So I felt, again, like I needed to be there. And I went and I spent the weekend learning how sound is energy also, how people have been studying and getting these recordings for 20 years almost, and how they're done and how the sound is manipulated. And we would hear the recordings that Tom and Lisa had from beyond, that some were clear, some were fuzzy, but they were all, for me, just like proof that this is real. And we would sit, there's only a half dozen of us in class with Tom and Lisa, and we sat, and it almost seemed like a seance kind of thing, but it wasn't. It was all love. And we sat, we held hands, and we just said, if there's somebody with us that wants to come through, here's our tape recorders, try very hard to speak into them, kind of a thing. Well, then our messages got uploaded onto Tom's computer, and then he just played them really loud to see if we heard any messages. So I didn't hear anything, except for Tom and Lisa heard on my tape recorder. They heard my mom's name. They heard my grandmother's name. They said, "Do you have a grandfather who's named Johnny?" It's like, you can hear that, and they said, "Yeah." Listening to one of these things is, you hear the white noise in the background. So say it's the sound of raindrops. I mean, our ears want to hear the raindrops. So it's almost like you have to set aside the raindrops and think, well, if the raindrops weren't there, is there anything else? And they, at that time, had been listening to EVPs for 17 years. And so they could distinguish the names and the sounds, the words, from my recording. So I was convinced at that point that it's real. But still, I thought, I need to get one of these myself so I can prove this to other people, because the good girl inside of me knew that if I had eventually the courage to come through and share my story, that a whole bunch of people would not only, people that are grieving would feel that their loved ones aren't gone, and people could go back to living, and like this, I knew something good would come of it. But at that point, I couldn't just rely on what was coming from my head. So on the Saturday night, the last night of class, I go to my cabin, and I was there by myself. There was just tons of water because it was raining, pouring outside. So it was very loud of rain, and I just had a little heater on in my cabin in the woods, and I had my tape recorder, and I just imagined my grandmother, my grandfather, my aunt, and my uncle at the foot of my bed, and I pressed the record button, and I said, if you guys are here and this is real, I said, can you really try to talk loud? Because I think I'm meant to help people, but if I can't hear you, like I can't help, whatever the words were. So I said, I'm going to let this record a minute, and then I'll say good night. So I just let my recorder record the sound of the raindrops, and then I said good night. Now, I didn't have my computer with me. I just had a set of headphones, and I put the headphones into the end of the digital recorder, and I listened. And then I only hear raindrops, and then all of a sudden I heard something else. And the something else I heard, Michael, is a male voice say, good night, Sandra. And then there's two whispers from female voices that say, good night, good night. And then another male's voice that says, good night. It was loud. It was clear. There was nobody around that could have put that on there. And I went back into class that next day. And, I mean, well, let me just back up a little. I won't use profanity on your show, I promise, but I was scared to death. Well, like, suddenly, I wanted to believe in life after death. I wanted to be my loved ones were there. But to actually hear a voice meant that there were people right around me that I couldn't see that somehow did that. And then I started questioning my privacy. Are people always around me? Am I never alone? And, I ended up, I was scared, and I fell asleep scared. And when I woke up the next day, when I went to class and I played my recording, it did a couple of things. One, Tom and Lisa were thrilled that somebody in the class got one that was loud enough to hear. But the other thing that it did is the people that were in the class with me had either had children die or a spouse that had died. And just by hearing my EVP there, they had the faith that their loved one was still with them. And so, like, a huge bunch of grief just kind of, like, let go at that point for them. So after that, but after that, I had the guts to start talking about it. And so people would say, I don't believe that's true. And I said, well, let's do a recording. So I started, and I developed that ear for listening to the sounds within the background noise. And not only was I telling people what I saw in my mind's eye, but they could hear, and most of the times all they heard was I love you, or they heard someone's name. But, like, I had, this is a little strange, but I had been on a shuttle from the Atlanta airport to a hotel, and this man sitting next to me, he was having a bad day, and he happened to mention that his little sister had died years before. He had never got over the grief of her, and this is on the shuttle ride. And I thought, oh, here's this opportunity to be courageous. Well, I told him about the EVP and doing the medium stuff, and he says, could you do one with me? And I'm thinking, I don't know. And so we ended up in my hotel room, and I trusted this guy, obviously. I don't take major risks, but I knew this guy was a business guy and safe. And I turned the shower on for the background noise of having water, because I thought water would be a good thing because the raindrops worked. And so basically, you say a little prayer first, and we imagine ourselves in the middle of this high energy vortex, because again, it's energy. Positive energy needs to be used, they say, to put these voices on these recorders. And so we only recorded for a minute, and normally it takes about an hour to really go through the bits of the recording, because it takes something to really listen. Well, in my mind, I saw a little girl with pigtails and big brown eyes, little gap between her teeth. She was about 9 years old. I got the name, I think it was Cindy. I can't really remember, but I think it was Cindy. And so what showed up on the recorder, and he heard it, was an I love you, Billy. Remember the game we used to play. Remember Clue. And I heard it, he heard it, and he said that was the game he had played with his little sister. That's exactly what she looked like. And so not only having what was in my head, but what we heard, And he was the first of, I think, probably about 200 people that I just met in my travels, and we would do these recordings, and it would change people's lives. So I don't tell lots of people that story because you have to, because I think it really sounds pretty much out there and crazy to start with talking about the EVPs. But once you have the foundation of all these other things that are possible, and even doing the remote viewing, I mean, this whole other world
Well, I've done the EVP, and I can relate to that movie White Noise because that's what set it off for me. I actually watched that movie, and I seen at the end of the CD it showed tips on how to do it. So I tested it. I happened to have lived at the time in an apartment that had activity, and that's what led me to White Noise. I said, well, let me watch something on this because I really thought that there was entities in my apartment.
Right.
I did the EVP thing, and sure enough, to make a long story short, because I don't want to bore my listeners, they've heard this one before, but I did get an EVP back. I says, oh, that's right. You can't have none because you're dead. I'm trying to torment them a little so they'll, answer me back. Well, this little girl's voice comes on the tape and says, so who cares? And it's clearly a little girl. And it was as clear as you and I talking right now. And my kids were in that apartment. They seen we'd have the blinds leaving the windowsill and slapping back and forth. Things would come off the wall. I mean, I thought I was in some kind of fairy tale. I mean, it's just, I'm not used to seeing that kind of stuff. But anyway, that movie helped me too. And I have that EVP, and I play it on the show occasionally. And I've only done it a couple times, but both times I've done it, it's worked.
Yeah, and I don't, I don't like scary movies, so I wouldn't recommend people learn about EVPs by watching White Noise because it's scary. And even it was Tom and Lisa Butler who wrote the book and taught me how to do it. They, this Hollywood, whoever they were that wanted to create the movie, Tom and Lisa taught them about how to do EVPs. They didn't know it was going to be a horror movie, though, because they were really upset when the movie came out and it was a horror movie. But they said on one hand, it was bad because it's not like there's all these demons running around all the time, all of us. But they said the good news is it pretty much went viral, and it had people actually start to experiment with EVPs and find out, oh, it's very much real. So this goes back to what you said about the frequencies and the energy, and there's so much possible. And so many times people will have a dream of a loved one, or they'll find a penny that shows up, or a butterfly will be around you, and you might have lost somebody and your favorite thing together was butterflies. And to really believe that it's real, they're there. Here's a funny story I just heard 3 days ago. Is a gal and her mother had made an agreement that whoever goes first will make sure they give the other one a sign. And they used to love to watch John Edwards on television. Mm-hmm. And so the mother happened to be diagnosed with some kind of a brain cancer, and she died quickly after. And, of course, the daughter was grieving something terrible and missed her mom. Well, John Edwards came to town. So the daughter, she's an adult, drags her father along. And, of course, the father says, oh, I don't believe in any of this. Oh, I don't believe in any of this. But he went. Well, John Edwards came right out, something like 1,200 people in the auditorium, came right up to them first and said, you have a loud mother that used to love watching me, and she wants me to come to you first. And so she said some things to the daughter, through John Edwards, to validate that was really her, and then said to the father, I was there. I know about Little Bo Peep and the staff. And so the father burst into tears, and the daughter's thinking, Little Bo Peep, what is he talking about? Well, after the woman had died, he had been walking, I think they lived in Chicago, had been walking along the riverbank, and he sat on a bench. Well, there was a man dressed in drag as Little Bo Peep, who started hitting on the father. There's no way possible that any human being would have witnessed that. So he felt from that obviously his deceased wife is still there, and she had a good sense of humor, and that's why she brought that up. And so later on that month, it was their anniversary. He took her out to dinner. He sat at a table, with an empty chair, celebrated the anniversary, took her out, had an extra ticket for the opera. They used to love the opera together, and he's living a whole different life because they were married a long time, but with the belief that she's still around. And I thought, what a good example that is, how to live life that, and it's not like he brings her everywhere, but just the fact that to not grieve, they're just invisible to us. We will see them again. Our life is for living right now and making the most of it. So that was just a great story that I just heard.
Oh, absolutely, and amen to that. And that kind of just answers my last question, and that is, what would be last impression or last bit of advice for people who have a loved one who's maybe knocking on that door to the other side, and I don't know how to deal with that pain and grief. What's the best way for them to do that?
Well, I encourage people to download my free audio because it's there. It's readily accessible. I have the domain name survivegrief.com, and it's simple as pressing the play button. And you can hear there's something called anticipatory grief, even before we pass away, that it's what's happening inside of our mind, and it's what's happening with this little voice, and to kind of understand the process and how we feel. So I encourage people to understand, especially if you have fear or if you know someone who's either has died or might be, or even, like I said earlier, if you're dealing with a loss from a divorce or from loss of job or your health has changed, any major change, the grieving process is greatly understood with my Survive Grief audio. Really good.
Oh,
And I would love very much so people to, and this is not a pitch to read We Don't Die from a monetary point of view, but it is from a point of view of, and whether you download it on Kindle or even just, I have the first couple of chapters you can read for free on my website, wedon'tdie.com, but to have an understanding, to hear more of the stories. There's so many different bits of the evidence that I have that we didn't even touch on today, and to understand and to start looking at your life from a point of maybe being that soul that chose not to stick in heaven because there's really life to be had here, and how to come to grips with who you are and what your life is for. And it's never too late. It really isn't, to have the life of your dreams and to understand who you are, what you're meant to be, or put it all in perspective and have peace and have love. And, I did a radio show in Connecticut, which it was on a playful rock and roll morning show, and we talked about the book and what I believe and everything. But that radio station also covered Newtown, Connecticut, where all those kids lost their lives almost a year ago, from the school shooting. Yeah. And so to speak about that heartache and the grief and how do people go on, and knowing that I really, when we can understand something, and especially when we can understand grief and how it acts inside of our brain and bodies, and understand it, we can get through it and we can get back into life faster. A lot of people who've lost a loved one, a part of them dies inside themselves, and then they never really go on to living a fulfilling life. And so this DJ said, he was so sweet and but sincere. He said, what you have, Sandra, it's not about grief and it's not about life after death. He says what you really have is a handbook for being human. how to navigate through all of it, and then ultimately, live full out and get your money's worth out of your life. So that summed it up, and anything that I can do to give people hope, give people faith, take away some pain. And like I said, often out of our most painful experiences comes what we're meant to do and how we're meant to make a difference with others. So we might not be able to see it all while it's happening to us, but to just have some faith and hope. And my email address, you can readily access me through WeDon'tDie.com. There's a contact Sandra button, and I answer every email. I really do, because I'm there for people to win and to have a good life. And so I encourage any of your listeners to keep in touch with me.
Okay, and We Don't Die, A Skeptic's Discovery of Life After Death. They can get this book also on the website, and I assume it's on...
Yeah, it's on it's wherever you buy books, whether you're an Amazon or Barnes & Noble or your local bookstore. Every bookstore, if they don't have it, they can get you a copy with ease. And if you want a copy from me, that I can sign it to you, you can certainly get that at WeDon'tDie.com.
Yeah, I have my autographed copy, and I got to say it is an incredible book. I think that it certainly will help a lot of people, and I thank you for the time you've put in, the research that you've done, and for sharing it with us. And I thank you very much for being a guest on Late Night in Midland, and happy Halloween to you.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. Happy Halloween to you, too. And what a perfect night to really think about those we have loved and you think you've lost. But this is a perfect night to just clear your mind and be in communication with them, because they're still around.
Absolutely. Well, Sandra, thank you so much. And as you know, we'll be airing this on Halloween night. That is tomorrow night. And you'll be all linked up on the website and all that good stuff. I do thank you very much.
Oh, Michael, it's my pleasure. Call on me anytime. I really enjoyed this. And thank you for all you do to make a difference with others.
Oh,
awesome.
You bet. You bet. Well, thank you, and I have a feeling this won't be
okay,
the only time
well,
we talk,
I want to first thank Sandra Champlain
All right.
for being my
bye-bye.
guest tonight.
Bye-bye.
What
Thank
a
you. You
fascinating book that she has. I mean, I have it right here. I have an autographed copy. And We Don't Die, A Skeptic's Discovery of Life After Death. It really opens your eyes if you're one who has never been able to open them that wide before. This book will certainly help you do that. I don't say that too often about books. This is a really good one. So with that, folks, thank you all very much for joining us here tonight for this Halloween edition of Late Night in the Midlands on the LNM Radio Network. Keep your eyes posted to the sky, because you never know what you might see. Maybe a witch on a broom.